Have you ever had a job where the instructions made absolutely no sense? Now, imagine those instructions are for dealing with supernatural entities. My night shift at this coffee shop wasn't just about brewing lattes. It was a chilling dance with rules that were designed to fail, leaving me exposed to whatever lurked in the shadows. The coffee wasn't the only thing giving me jitters. It started out of desperation. That's how these things usually start, isn't it? I was a broke college student in Lubbock, Texas, drowning in tuition fees and living off instant noodles that tasted like cardboard and regret. When I saw the help wanted sign in the window of the Rusty Mug, a solitary coffee shop perched on a lonely stretch of highway just outside the city limits, I didn't think about safety. I thought about rent. The place was an architectural anomaly, an old, dark-wood Victorian structure that looked like it had been plucked from a foggy London street and dropped violently onto the dry, red Texas dirt. By day, it was charming in a kitschy way, smelling of roasted beans and cinnamon. By night, as I was soon to discover, the charm rotted away, leaving something far more sinister exposed. My orientation was less of a training session and more of a frantic evacuation briefing. Mr. Abernathy, the owner, was a man who looked like he hadn't slept since the Carter administration. His eyes were wide and darting, constantly checking the corners of the room as if he owed them money. "Elias, good, you're here," Abernathy said, shoving a heavy, leather-bound binder into my chest the moment I walked in for my first graveyard shift. It was 9:45 p.m. "Listen, the espresso machine is finicky, the grinder jams if you overfill it, and the register sticks on the number 9. Standard stuff." I nodded, clutching the binder. "Okay, seems simple enough. Anything else?" Abernathy froze. The air in the shop seemed to drop 10 degrees. He leaned in close, smelling of stale tobacco and sheer panic. "The rules, Elias. The binder contains the rules. The day shift has their protocols, but the night shift is different. We have a unique ecosystem here." "Ecosystem?" I asked, a nervous chuckle escaping me. "Sir, it's a coffee shop, not a rainforest." He didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. He just gripped my shoulder with a hand that felt surprisingly cold. "Read them. Memorize them. Follow them exactly as written. Do not improvise. Do not try to be a hero. And for the love of God, do not try to make sense of them. Logic is not your friend after midnight." With that, he grabbed his coat and practically sprinted for the door. "I have to be across the county line by 10 o'clock. Good luck, son." The bell above the door chimed, a lonely, tinny sound that echoed too long in the empty shop. I was alone. The silence of the West Texas plains is heavy. It presses against the windows like a physical weight. I locked the front door. We were drive-through only after 10 p.m. and opened the binder. The first few pages were standard: how to steam milk, the recipe for the Texas pecan brew, and cleaning schedules. I felt a wave of relief. Abernathy was just a weirdo, a local eccentric trying to haze the new guy. I poured myself a cup of the dark roast and flipped to the tab marked Night Protocols. The font changed. It looked like it had been typed on a typewriter with a ribbon running out of ink. Rule 1. The lights in the main lobby must remain at 50% dimness. If they flicker, do not look up at the fixtures. Count to 10 loudly. If the flickering stops, continue work. If it doesn't, hide in a walk-in freezer until you hear glass break. I frowned, taking a sip of coffee. Okay, faulty wiring. Got it. Rule 2. The radio is to be kept on the classical station, 98.7 FM. If the music changes to 1940s big band swing, unplug the radio immediately. Do not plug it back in until sunrise. If the music continues after unplugging, hum a discordant tune. They hate dissonance. I whispered to the empty room. A sudden thump from the upstairs storage room made me jump, spilling hot coffee on my hand. I hissed in pain, wiping it on my apron. The building was settling. That's all. Old houses make noise. I forced myself to read on, my skepticism battling a rising tide of unease. Rule 3. At 10:15 p.m., you must lock the back delivery door. It has 3 deadbolts. Lock the top one, then the bottom one, then the middle one. If you do it out of order, unlock them all and start over. Never look through the peephole while locking the door. If you feel warm breath on your neck while facing the door, do not turn around. Say, "No deliveries tonight," and walk backward to the counter. I looked at the clock. 10:12 p.m. This is ridiculous, I muttered, though my voice sounded small in the cavernous room. Still, a job was a job. I walked through the kitchen, the stainless steel appliances gleaming under the harsh fluorescent strips. The back hallway was darker, the light bulb humming with an angry buzz. There was the heavy iron door. I approached it, keys in hand. 10:14 p.m. I waited a few seconds. 10:15 p.m. Top lock. Click. Bottom lock. Click. Middle lock. Click. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. See? Nothing to it. Just an old man's superstitions. I turned to leave, but then I stopped. The peephole. It was right there, a small fisheye lens distorted by grime. It was just glass. There was nothing on the other side but the empty parking lot and miles of scrub brush. A morbid curiosity, the kind that kills cats and horror movie protagonists, tugged at me. Just a peek, my brain whispered. Prove Abernathy is crazy. I leaned in. The glass was cold against my eye. Outside, the world was pitch black, illuminated only by the faint, sickly yellow glow of a distant street lamp. Nothing, just dirt and weight. Something was standing just at the edge of the light. It was tall, impossibly tall. Its limbs were elongated, stretching like taffy, and it was swaying in a wind that I couldn't hear. It had no face, just a smooth, pale surface where features should be. And then it moved, not a walk, but a glitchy, rapid jerk forward. It was suddenly 10 feet closer. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trap bird. I blinked, pulling back, but then leaned in again, unable to look away. It was closer again, right at the bottom of the steps. Don't look through the peephole. I tore myself away from the door, my breath coming in jagged gasps. No deliveries tonight. I choked out, my voice cracking. I didn't feel breath on my neck, but the air behind me felt suddenly, violently charged with static. I walked backward, my heels clicking on the linoleum, staring at the iron door, half expecting it to burst open. I didn't stop until my back hit the front counter. I scrambled over it, putting the espresso machine between me and the hallway. Okay, I panted, rubbing my face. Okay, maybe I'm tired. Maybe the stress is getting to me. Visual hallucinations. It happens. But my hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold the binder. I needed a distraction. I needed to work. I looked at the list again, hoping for a normal instruction like wipe the tables. Rule 4. The drive-thru speaker is sensitive. Sometimes it picks up interference. If you hear static, ignore it. If you hear a woman crying, ask for her order. If she asks for the red-eye special, tell her we are out of ingredients. If she asks to come inside, lay flat on the floor behind the counter, and do not move until you hear a car drive away. We do not sell a red-eye special. The paradoxes were starting to hurt my head. Ask for her order, but refuse the specific order, but hide if she wants to come in. It was a labyrinth of behavioral triggers designed to navigate a minefield I couldn't see. I tried to busy myself with grinding beans. The roar of the machine was comforting, drowning out the creaks of the old house. I made myself a latte, the steam rising in swirling patterns. I was just taking a sip when the headset on the counter crackled to life. VZZRT. SSSSHHHH. Static. Just static. Rule for set ignore it. Please. I froze. The voice was faint, tinny, buried under layers of white noise. It sounded wet, like someone speaking with a mouth full of water. It's so cold. I stared at the headset. It was 11:30 p.m. I hadn't heard the chime that signaled a car entering the drive-thru lane. There was no engine noise. I looked at the monitor that showed the camera feed for the drive-thru. The screen was gray. Not black, not off. Just a swirling, pulsating gray fog. I picked up the headset, my fingers trembling. Welcome to the Rusty Mug, I said, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. Can I take your order? Silence. Then a sob. A ragged, tearing sound that made my skin crawl. I need to come in. Please let me in. My stomach dropped. The rule. Lay flat on the floor. I can't do that, ma'am. I stammered, gripping the counter. Drive-thru only. The red-eye special. Just 1 cup. We're out of ingredients. I recited, the words tasting like ash. Liar. The scream that erupted from the headset wasn't human. It was a digital screech, a corrupted audio file of pure rage that spiked so loud I threw the headset across the room. It clattered against the wall, but the screaming didn't stop. It wasn't coming from the headset anymore. It was coming from the window. The drive-through window, right behind me. I spun around. The heavy sliding glass was vibrating, rattling in its frame as if a hurricane were battering it from the outside. But beyond the glass, there was no wind. There was only a face pressed against the window. It was a woman, or what used to be one. Her skin was gray and sodden, hair plastered to her skull. Her eyes were wide, white, and devoid of pupils. Her mouth was open in an impossible scream, revealing rows of needle-like teeth that gnashed against the glass. Lay flat on the floor. I dropped. I hit the deck so hard my knees cracked against the tile. I curled into a ball beneath the register, squeezing my eyes shut, my hands over my ears. The banging on the glass started. Thump, 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 rhythmic, heavy, wet. Go away, I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. Go away, go away. I lay there for what felt like hours. The banging grew louder, shaking the counters, rattling the cups stacked above me. Then abruptly it stopped. Silence returned to the shop, heavy and oppressive. I waited. 1 minute. 2. Finally, I heard the sound of tires crunching on gravel, slowly fading away into the distance. I let out a shuddering breath and crawled out, my legs feeling like jelly. I risked a glance at the window. Nothing. Just my own terrified reflection staring back from the blackness. I grabbed the binder again, flipping the pages frantically. I needed to know what else was coming. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a hazing. This was a survival manual. I found the next section. Rule 6. At midnight, the inventory in the basement needs to be checked. You must go down there. The lights will not work. Take the flashlight from under the register. Important. The flashlight beam must remain steady. Do not sweep it side to side. If the beam illuminates a red door that wasn't there yesterday, enter it immediately and close it behind you. Do not stay in the hallway. The hallway is where the hungry things live. The red room is safe, but you must pay the toll to leave. My blood ran cold. The basement. Abernathy had mentioned a basement, but he hadn't mentioned red doors or hungry things. And the rule, it was contradictory insanity. Enter the mysterious door to be safe. Every horror instinct I had screamed that entering a magical door in a haunted basement was a one-way ticket to oblivion. But the alternative, the hungry things in the hallway, sounded worse. I looked at the digital clock on the espresso machine. 11:58 p.m. I had 2 minutes to decide if I was going to quit and run out into the dark where the screaming woman might be waiting, or descend into the dark basement where a red door might demand a toll I couldn't pay. The phone on the wall rang. It was an old rotary phone, purely decorative, or so I thought. It rang with a shrill, physical bell that rattled my bones. I stared at it. Rule 9. I remembered seeing it earlier. If the rotary phone rings, answer it. If a child asks for their mother, hang up. If a man with a deep voice asks for Mr. Thorne, listen carefully to his instructions. He is the only one who can help you if you've broken a rule. Mr. Thorne. That was me. I picked up the receiver, my hands sweating. Hello. You hesitated at the window. Elias. A voice rumbled. It sounded like grinding stones. You looked through the peephole. You were already marked. Who is this? I demanded, gripping the cord. Midnight is coming, Elias. The voice growled. The basement calls. Remember, the red door lies. The rule is a trap. Do not enter the red door. If you see it, run. Click. The line went dead. I looked at the binder. Rule 6. Enter the red door immediately. The voice on the phone. The red door lies. The clock clicked to 12 a.m. The lights in the shop died. All of them. And from beneath the floorboards, deep in the basement, I heard the slow, creaking sound of a door opening. The darkness in the coffee shop wasn't simply an absence of light. It was a physical weight, heavy and suffocating, pressing against my eardrums. The silence was absolute, save for the frantic pounding of my own heart and the lingering echo of the mysterious caller's warning. The red door lies. I stood frozen behind the counter, the receiver of the dead phone still clutched in my sweaty hand. The basement door, which I had locked, I was sure I had locked it, was now standing ajar, a gaping maw of blackness leading into the bowels of the earth. I had a choice. Rule 6 stated unequivocally that I must go down there and check the inventory. It also said to enter the red door. The voice on the phone said the opposite. One was written in ink, the other was a ghost on the line. But the voice knew about the peephole. The voice knew I was marked. I grabbed the heavy-duty flashlight from beneath the register. My hand was shaking so bad the beam danced across the floor like a nervous firefly. I remembered the rule. The flashlight beam must remain steady. Do not sweep it side to side. Steady, I whispered, gripping the handle with both hands, locking my elbows against my ribs. Steady. I moved toward the basement door, the air growing colder with every step, smelling of wet earth and something metallic, like old pennies or dry blood. I descended the wooden stairs, each one groaning under my weight like a dying animal. The beam of my flashlight cut a narrow tunnel through the gloom. I kept it fixed strictly ahead, refusing to let my eyes wander to the periphery, where shadows seemed to writhe and coil. The basement was a labyrinth of shelving units packed with sacks of coffee beans, syrups, and cleaning supplies. Dust motes danced in the light, swirling in patterns that looked suspiciously deliberate. I walked down the central aisle, counted my steps. Then I saw it. In the middle of the damp, concrete wall, where there should have been nothing but foundation, stood a door. It was painted a vibrant, glossy crimson, starkly out of place amidst the rot and decay. It didn't look old. It looked freshly painted, the brass knob gleaming. And it was warm. Even from 10 feet away, I could feel a radiating heat coming from it, like a hearth fire in winter. It was inviting. It whispered of safety, of a place where the rules didn't apply. Enter the red door, immediately. The rule from the binder flashed in my mind. My hand twitched. I wanted to open it. I wanted to hide from the dark. I took a step forward. The red door lies. The memory of the voice on the phone was like a splash of ice water. I stopped. I didn't move the light, but I strained my ears. Beneath the inviting hum of the door, I heard something else. A wet, chewing sound. The sound of meat being separated from bone. It was coming from behind a red door. No, I breathed. I stepped back. That's when the shadows in the hallway, the place the rule book called the home of the hungry things, began to detach themselves from the walls. They weren't just absences of light. They were three-dimensional silhouettes, jagged and thin, peeling away from the concrete like scabbed skin. I didn't turn the light. I didn't run into the red room. I backed away, keeping the beam fixed on the center of the aisle, praying that the hungry things couldn't see me if I didn't illuminate them. A claw, long and comprised of pure shadow, swiped through the space where my head had been a second before. I felt the wind of it, cold and sharp. I scrambled up the stairs, abandoning dignity, my shins banging against the steps. I slammed the basement door shut and, threw the deadbolt, collapsing against it. From the other side came a soft, polite knock. Then silence. I was back in the lobby. The lights flickered and buzzed back to life, but they were dimmer now, casting long, sickly yellow shadows that stretched across the floor. I checked the time. 12:15 a.m. I had survived the basement, but the night was young, and the binder was waiting. I returned to the counter, needing to ground myself in reality. I tried to focus on the tasks. Restock the cups. Wipe the counters. But the paradoxical nature of the job was about to ramp up. I flipped the page to the section marked 12 a.m. to 2 a.m. protocols. The rules here were denser, the handwriting more frantic. Rule 12. You must restock the napkin dispensers in the lobby. However, you must never touch a napkin with your bare skin. If you do, the texture will change to that of human skin. Furthermore, you must not wear gloves, as the management takes this as an insult to their cleanliness standards. I stared at the page. Don't touch it with skin. Don't wear gloves. How the hell am I supposed to restock them? My frustration began to mount, a hot coal burning in my chest that momentarily eclipsed the fear. It was a logic puzzle designed by a sadist. I looked around the kitchen. Tongs. I found a pair of stainless steel tongs used for pastries. I walked out into the lobby, tongs in one hand, a stack of napkins in the other, balanced precariously on the metal sleeve of the tongs. I felt ridiculous. A grown man, terrified of ghosts, trying to load napkins like I was defusing a bomb. I managed to shove the stack into the dispenser. Just as I withdrew the tongs, the stack shifted. One napkin fluttered out. Instinctively, I reached out to catch it. My index finger brushed the paper. It didn't feel like paper. It was warm. It was soft. It had a pulse. I recoiled with a yelp, dropping the tongs. The napkin lay on the table, heaving rhythmically, expanding and contracting like a tiny lung. Then, slowly, it dissolved into a puddle of viscous, white fluid that dripped onto the floor. Okay, I panted, backing away. Okay, paradox confirmed. I retreated behind the counter. The rules weren't just arbitrary. They were triggers. They were the combination lock to a safe full of nightmares. I needed to clean the back storage closet. Rule 14 caught my eye, and my blood ran cold. Rule 14. The back storage closet must be organized by 1 a.m. All boxes must be labeled with the correct color marker. Blue for decaf, red for regular, black for expired. However, under no circumstances are you to turn on a light in the storage closet. The entities inside are light sensitive and aggressive. Do not use a flashlight. Do not use a lighter. Navigate by memory and feel. Navigate by feel. I shouted at the empty room. How am I supposed to color code boxes in pitch darkness? It was impossible. It was a setup. If I turned on the light, I'd be attacked. If I didn't label the boxes, I'd be breaking a rule, and I'd seen what happened when rules were broken. I grabbed the markers. Red, blue, black. I walked to the storage closet. It was a small room at the end of the hall, smelling of cardboard and dust. I opened the door. Absolute blackness. I stepped in, leaving the door open to catch the faint light from the hallway. But the moment I crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind me. I spun around, grabbing the knob. Locked. Great. I muttered, panic rising in my throat. Just great. I was in the dark with the light-sensitive things. I could hear them breathing. It was a raspy, rattling sound coming from the top shelves. Label boxes. I felt around. I found a box. It felt like a coffee shipment. Which marker? I had a guess. I uncapped one, praying it was red. I scribbled on the box. Scritch scratch. The breathing stopped. A voice, right next to my ear, whispered, "That is blue." The box contains teeth. I froze. The voice was like dry leaves skittering on pavement. "Try again, Elias," the voice taunted. "We need to be sorted." I fumbled for another marker. My heart was hammering, so hard I thought I'd pass out. I scribbled with the second marker. "Black," the voice hissed, sounding pleased. "Expired. Just like you will be." Something brushed against my leg. Something furry and wet. I kicked out, my foot connecting with something soft that let out a high-pitched giggle. "Let me out," I screamed, banging on the door. Click. The door swung open. I tumbled out into the hallway, gasping for air. I looked back into the closet. The light from the hall illuminated the boxes. They were all labeled perfectly in my handwriting. But the boxes weren't cardboard anymore. They were made of bone, fused together seamlessly. And the labels didn't say decaf or regular. They read, "Joy, sorrow, rage." I slammed the door shut and backed away, my mind reeling. The coffee shop wasn't just haunted. It was a psychological thresher, separating my sanity from my instinct. I returned to the front, trembling. It was 1:15 a.m. The night was dragging, stretching time like taffy. A chime. The front doorbell. I froze. The front door was locked. I had checked it 3 times. I looked up. Standing in front of the counter was a man. He hadn't walked in. He had simply arrived. He wore a beige trench coat that looked damp and a wide-brimmed hat that obscured his eyes. He sat perfectly still at table 4. I grabbed the binder. Rule 18. If a man in a beige trench coat appears at table 4, he is the auditor. Serve him a black coffee immediately. Do not ask for payment. Do not make eye contact. Do not accept a tip. If he leaves a coin, sweep it into the dustpan and bury it outside. Do not touch it. I moved on autopilot. I poured a cup of black coffee, my hands trembling. The steam rose up, curling into shapes that looked like grasping hands. I walked around the counter, keeping my eyes fixed on a man's chest. "Here you are," I said, placing the cup down. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. The air around him smelled of ozone and burning hair. "Thank you, Elias," he said. His voice wasn't a sound. It was a vibration in my teeth. I turned to walk away, remembering the rule. "No eye contact." "Wait," he commanded. I stopped, my back to him. "You are doing adequately. But the rules are changing. The house is waking up." I heard the clink of metal on the table. "For your service." I didn't turn around. I walked back to the counter, my heart thumping in my throat. I waited until I heard the chime again. I looked back. Table 4 was empty. The coffee cup was full, but the liquid was boiling, bubbling violently, as if heated by a blowtorch. Next to the cup sat a coin. It wasn't silver or gold. It was a dull, rusty iron, stamped with a face that looked disturbingly like my own, but screaming, "Do not touch it." I grabbed the broom and dustpan. I swept the coin up. It was heavy, unnaturally so. As I carried it to the back door to bury it, I felt a searing heat radiating through the plastic handle of the dustpan. The coin was hot. I opened the back door, careful not to look through the peephole, and tossed the coin into the dirt. As soon as it hit the ground, the grass around it withered and died in a perfect circle, turning to gray ash in seconds. I locked the door again. Top, bottom, middle. I leaned my forehead against the cool metal of the door. I was exhausted. My reality was fraying. The rules were contradictory. The customers were monsters. And the building itself seemed to be digesting me. I walked back to the counter. I needed to sit down. I needed a moment. Then I saw it. The binder lay open on the counter where I had left it. But the page had flipped. It wasn't on the typed pages anymore. It was on a page near the back, covered in frantic, handwritten scrawls in red ink. The ink was still wet. I leaned in to read it, and my breath hitched in my throat. Rule 29. If you have survived until 2 a.m., you must choose a sacrifice. The darkness demands a piece of you. You can give a fingernail, a lock of hair, or a memory. If you do not choose, it will take something you need. Choose quickly. It is already in the room with you. The air in the shop shifted. The silence broke. From every corner of the room, from the vents, from the drains, came a sound. It was the sound of thousands of tiny, clicking legs. I looked up at the ceiling. The acoustic tiles were shifting. Something was pushing against them from the other side, bulging downward, straining to break through. I looked at the clock. 1:59 a.m. I had 60 seconds to maim myself, or lose something I needed. And as the first tile cracked and a long, segmented black leg probed the air, I realized I had no idea how to give a memory. I reached for the scissors in the utility drawer. The scissors felt heavy and cold in my hand. A mundane office tool transformed into an instrument of grim necessity. Above me, the ceiling tiles groaned and buckled under the weight of whatever was scurrying in the crawl space. Click, click, click. The sound was a rhythmic nightmare, the applause of 1,000 insectoid limbs. Rule 29. Choose a sacrifice. Fingernail, hair, or memory. If you do not choose, it will take something you need. The clock blinked. 1:59 a.m. turned to 2 a.m. I didn't have time to figure out the metaphysical mechanics of sacrificing a memory. I grabbed a lock of my own hair, right at the front where it was longest, and squeezed the scissors shut. The blades were dull. They gnawed rather than cut. With a frantic yank and a sharp sting of pain, I severed a thick clump of dark hair. "Here!" I screamed, throwing the hair onto the center of the floor. "Take it." The hair hit the linoleum. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the floor beneath the clump seemed to liquefy. The tiles bubbled and turned into a black, tar-like substance that swallowed the hair instantly. A low, satisfied rumble vibrated through the foundation of the shop, shaking the espresso cups in their stacks. The clicking in the ceiling stopped abruptly. The bulging tiles settled back into place. The silence returned, but it felt thinner now, brittle, like a sheet of ice about to crack. I slumped against the counter, my chest heaving. I had bought myself time, but the cost was escalating. My hand went to the jagged patch of stubble on my head. This was real. The physical toll was beginning to mount alongside the psychological one. I needed water. I went to the sink, turning the tap. Instead of clear water, a thick, brown sludge oozed out, smelling of sulfur. I turned it off immediately. "Right," I muttered dryly. "No water." Note to self. I went back to the binder. I needed to know what fresh hell awaited me between 2 o'clock and 4 a.m. I flipped the page, my fingers leaving smudges of sweat on the paper. Rule 33. At 2:30 a.m., the phone in the office will ring. This is not the lobby phone. This is the private line in the back office. You must answer it. The caller will be your mother. Or at least, it will sound exactly like her. She will beg you to come home. She will tell you there is a fire. She will scream, "Do not speak." If you utter a single word, she will appear in the room with you. But she won't be your mother anymore. Hang up only when she stops screaming. I read it twice. My mother lived 3 states away. She was safe in bed. This was a trick, a cruel, emotional bear trap. 2:25 a.m. I had 5 minutes to steel myself. The back office was a small, cramped room off the kitchen, filled with filing cabinets and a desk that smelled of mildew. I walked in, staring at the black rotary phone on the desk. It sat there like a coiled snake. 2:29 a.m. I took a deep breath, clamping my hand over my mouth to ensure I wouldn't make sound. Re-I-ing. The sound was piercing in the small room. I picked up the receiver and held it to my ear. Elias. My heart stopped. It was her. It was her voice, her inflection, the specific way she said my name with the softest. Elias, baby, are you there? I bit my lip, tasting copper. Tears pricked my eyes. It sounded so real. Elias, please, you have to come home. The house. Oh God, the house. Her voice pitched up into panic. There's smoke everywhere. I can't find the door. Elias, help me. My instinct screamed at me to answer, to tell her to get out, to call 911. My jaw muscles ached with the effort of staying silent. Why aren't you answering me? She shrieked. I'm burning. It hurts. Elias. The screaming started. It wasn't just a scream. It was the sound of vocal cords tearing, of lungs collapsing. It was the sound of agony, so pure it felt like it was physically scraping the inside of my skull. I squeezed my eyes shut, tears streaming down my face, my hand clamped so tight over my mouth my knuckles were white. She will appear in the room with you. I rocked back and forth, the receiver pressed to my ear, listening to the woman who sounded like my mother die over and over again. It went on for what felt like an eternity. Screams, pleas, the crackling of fire that wasn't there. Then, silence. A cold, dead silence. Good boy, the voice whispered. It wasn't my mother's voice anymore. It was deep, guttural, and mocking. Click. I slammed the phone down, my hands trembling uncontrollably. I stumbled out of the office, gasping for air, wiping the tears from my face. It was psychological torture. They were breaking me down, piece by piece. I needed to check the binder. I needed to know the rules so I could hate them properly. Rule 38. The basement has a dumbwaiter. It is welded shut. If you hear the bell ding, it means the weld has failed. Do not look inside the dumbwaiter. Place a raw meat patty on the tray and send it down. If we're out of meat, we'll improvise. But send something organic. As if on cue, a sharp ding echoed from the kitchen. I ran to the prep area. In a corner, the old, rusted dumbwaiter door was sliding open. It shouldn't have been moving. It was rusted solid. But there it was, revealing a dark, wooden shaft that smelled of rot. Meat, I gasped. I need meat. I tore open the fridge. We were a coffee shop. We had pastries, milk, fruit. We had breakfast sandwiches, frozen sausage patties. I grabbed a box of frozen sausage, ripping it open. Raw meat. The rules said raw. These were pre-cooked. Improvise. I looked around frantically. My eyes landed on the fruit bowl. An apple? No, not organic enough in the visceral sense. Milk? Too liquid. The dumbwaiter bell dinged again, impatient. A low growl emanated from a shaft, vibrating the floorboards. I looked at my arm. The scratch from the scissors earlier. A drop of blood. Something organic. I didn't have a choice. I grabbed a kitchen knife. I didn't cut myself. I wasn't that brave yet. But I saw a spider crawling on the counter. A large, hairy wolf spider. Normally, I'd be terrified. Now it was currency. I slammed a cup over it, trapping it. I slid a piece of paper under the cup, carried it to the dumbwaiter, and dumped the spider onto the tray. Eat up, I whispered. I pressed the button. The dumbwaiter groaned and descended into the dark. I held my breath. A few seconds later, a loud crunch echoed up the shaft, followed by a satisfied burp that sounded wet and deep. The door slid shut. Accepted. I exhaled, leaning against the counter. I was getting better at this. Or I was going insane. Probably both. I went back to the front. The atmosphere in the shop had changed again. It was heavier. The shadows were longer, sharper. The house was waking up, the auditor had said. I looked at the binder. Rule 42. Rule 42, the big one. If you hear your name called from the basement, do not answer it. Even if you know the voice. Even if it sounds like you. If you answer, you give it permission to trade places. Simple enough, I muttered. Don't talk to the basement. But then I saw the next rule. Rule 43. At 3 a.m., the ventilation system must be purged. To do this, you must go to the basement and turn the red valve 3 times to the left. If you do not purge the system, the air in the shop will become toxic with hallucinogenic spores. I stare at the 2 rules. Rule 42. Don't answer the voice in the basement. Rule 43. Go to the basement. It was a trap. A blatant, terrifying trap. I had to go down there to turn a valve, knowing that something down there would be calling my name, sounding like me, trying to steal my life. I grabbed a flashlight. I grabbed the knife I had used to catch the spider. It felt like a toy against the supernatural, but it was better than nothing. I walked to the basement door. It was closed. I opened it, and the smell hit me. Damp earth and ozone. I descended the stairs. The air was colder now, freezing my breath in front of me. I swept the light around. The red door from earlier was gone. The shelves were rearranged. The basement was changing layout. I saw the pipes in the far corner. The red valve. It was huge, rusted, and covered in condensation. I started walking toward it. Elias, a voice called out. I froze. It came from behind a stack of crates to my right. The voice was mine. It wasn't an imitation. It was my own voice, recorded and played back. Elias, over here. I found the exit. I bit my tongue. Don't answer. I kept walking, my eyes fixed on the valve. Elias, don't ignore me, the voice said, sounding hurt. I'm you. The real you. You're just the echo. Come here, let's switch back. Shut up, I thought. Shut up, shut up. I reached the valve. I gripped the cold metal. It wouldn't budge. It's stuck, isn't it? The voice, my voice, sneered from right behind my left shoulder. I could feel the cold breath on my ear. Let me help. I'm stronger. I strained against the valve, my muscles screaming. Turn, damn you. Just say yes, Elias. Just say, help me. That's all I need. The valve groaned. 1 turn. I can save us, Elias. I can make the rule stop. 2 turns. A hand landed on my shoulder. It looked like my hand, but the fingers were too long, with too many joints. Answer me, the voice roared, shifting into a demonic distortion of my own. I squeezed my eyes shut and threw my weight into the final turn. Clang. 3 turns. A hiss of steam erupted from the pipes, filling the basement with white fog. The hand on my shoulder was ripped away with a shriek of frustration. You missed your chance, the thing screamed, retreating into the shadows. The spores would have been kinder. I scrambled back up the stairs, slipping on the wet wood, not looking back until I had slammed the door and locked it. I collapsed on the floor of the kitchen, coughing. I had survived the basement again. But as I lay there, I realized something terrifying. The binder was open on the counter. I hadn't touched it, but the pages were flipping by themselves. Flip, flip, flip. They stopped on the very last page. There was only one rule written there, in bold, black letters that seemed to be carved into the paper. Rule 50. At 3:33 a.m., the manager will arrive for inspection. He does not like the living. He does not like the dead. He only likes order. You have broken 3 minor rules tonight. The shop is in chaos. You have 30 minutes to restore perfect order, or you will be fired. And in this establishment, termination is literal. I looked around. The shop was a wreck. Chairs were overturned. Coffee was spilled. The napkin dispenser was oozing slime. The hair I had sacrificed was a black stain on the floor. Restore order, I whispered. I looked at the clock. 3:03 a.m. I had 30 minutes to clean a haunted coffee shop while the ghosts of my mistakes watched from the shadows. And the manager was coming. I grabbed a mop. The water in the bucket turned to blood as soon as the mop head touched it. Of course, I said, a hysterical giggle bubbling up. Of course it does. I was going to have to clean blood with blood. Clean blood with blood, I muttered, the hysteria in my voice bouncing off the tiled walls. It was a nonsensical mantra for a nonsensical night. The mop bucket was filled with a crimson liquid that smelled of iron and old pennies, swirling lazily as if stirred by an invisible finger. Rule 50. Restore perfect order. The clock on the wall mocked me. 3:05 a.m. 28 minutes until the manager arrived. The term manager invoked a dread deeper than the specters or the basement doppelganger. Abernathy had been a jittery eccentric. The entity coming at 3:33 a.m. was an apex predator of bureaucracy. I dipped the mop into the red sludge. It was heavy, soaking into the cotton strands like syrup. I slapped it onto the floor where the black stain of my sacrificed hair lay. To my shock, the red liquid sizzled on contact, eating away the black tar and leaving the linoleum beneath pristine and white. Fight fire with fire, I realized. The shop's logic was inverted. To clean the stains of the supernatural, I had to use its own byproducts. I worked feverishly. I mopped the floor, the red liquid hissing and steaming as it cleansed the grime. I righted the chairs, but as soon as I turned my back, they would wobble and try to tip over again. I had to slam them down, shouting, "Stay," like I was training unruly dogs. 3:15 a.m. The napkin dispenser was still oozing white slime. I approached it with the tongs. The slime was hardening, turning into a crusty, shell-like substance. I chipped away at it, sweating profusely. Underneath, the metal of the dispenser was hot to the touch. I refilled it with fresh napkins, being careful not to touch them with my skin. This time, I used 2 spatulas like giant chopsticks. Good enough, I panted. The coffee spill on the counter had dried into a shape that looked disturbingly like a screaming face. I scrubbed it with a rag soaked in the red bucket water. The face seemed to mouth silent pleas as I erased it, but I scrubbed harder, shutting off my empathy. Empathy was a liability. 3:25 a.m. The shop looked acceptable. Not perfect, but orderly. The chairs were still, the floor gleamed with a faint reddish hue, and the counters were clear. Then, the lights went out. Not a flicker, a hard cut. Total, absolute darkness. And then, the temperature plummeted. My breath fogged instantly, crystallization forming on my eyelashes. The silence was absolute. No hum of the fridge, no wind outside, just the sound of my own pulse in my ears. A single spotlight clicked on. It was aimed directly at the front door. Click. The lock turned. The door opened slowly. A figure stepped in. It wasn't a monster. It wasn't a ghost. It was a man in a crisp, charcoal gray suit. He was tall, impeccably groomed, with silver hair slicked back. He carried a clipboard. He looked like every corporate auditor I'd ever feared. But his eyes were entirely black. No sclera, no iris. Just voids. He didn't walk, he glided. He stopped in the center of the room, scanning the environment. Employee ID, Elias Thorne, he stated. His voice was smooth, devoid of emotion, resonant like a cello. Shift report initiated. He walked to a table, ran a gloved finger along the edge, and inspected it. No dust. He made a tick on his clipboard. He walked to the napkin dispenser. He pulled one out. It was paper. He nodded. Tick. He approached the counter. He looked at the espresso machine. Pressure, he said. I scrambled to check the gauge. 9 bars, sir. Optimal. He stared at me. The void of his eyes pulled at my consciousness. You fed the dumbwaiter. Yes, sir. A spider. Organic. Acceptable. Tick. He was moving down the list. I was surviving. I was actually going to pass. Then he stopped. He turned slowly toward the basement door. The basement, he said. There is a disturbance. My heart hammered. I purged the vents, sir. Rule 43. You purged the vents, he agreed. But you left the door unlocked. I froze. Had I? I remembered slamming it. I remembered running. But had I turned the lock? The manager walked to the basement door. He pushed it. It swung open silently. Disorder, he whispered. The word carried the weight of a death sentence. I can fix it. I blurted out. I can lock it now. He turned to me. The breach has already occurred. Order must be maintained. The source of the disorder must be removed. He wasn't talking about the door. He was talking about me. He raised a hand. The shadows in the corners of the room surged forward, forming into tendrils that lashed at my ankles. I stumbled back, knocking over a stack of cups. Clumsy, the manager noted, marking his clipboard. Strike 2. Wait, I screamed, backing against the espresso machine. The rules. Rule 9. The phone. I remember the rotary phone. If a man with a deep voice asks for Mr. Thorne, listen carefully to his instructions. He is the only one who can help you if you've broken a rule. The manager paused. An appeal. I lunged for the phone on the wall. It wasn't ringing. I picked it up anyway. Dead air. No, I whispered. Come on. The shadow tendrils wrapped around my legs, dragging me toward the center of the room. The manager watched impassively. Termination in 3, 2. Rying. The phone in my hand exploded with sound. I nearly dropped it. Hello. I screamed. Put him on, the deep voice growled. I thrust the receiver toward the manager. It's for you. The manager looked at the phone with distaste. He stepped forward and took the receiver. He held it to his ear. He listened. His expression didn't change, but the shadows around my legs loosened slightly. Understood, the manager said finally. Irregular, but binding. He handed the phone back to me. You have a benefactor, Mr. Thorne. It seems your contract has a clause I overlooked. He adjusted his cuffs. However, the disorder remains. The basement door is open. Something has come up. He pointed to the open door. Standing at the top of the stairs was me. It was the doppelganger from the basement, the one I had refused to answer. It smiled, a wide, impossible grin that stretched too far across its face. It held a red valve wheel in its hand. He didn't lock it, the other Elias said, his voice a perfect mimicry of mine. So I let myself out. The manager looked between us. 2 employees, 1 position. Redundancy is inefficient. He looked at me. Eliminate the redundancy, Mr. Thorne. Prove your claim to this reality. What? I stammered. You want me to kill him? I want you to file a correction, the manager said coldly. He produced a letter opener from his pocket. It was silver, sharp, and glowed with a faint blue light. He tossed it onto the floor between us. The other Elias laughed. I'm the upgrade, Elias. I don't need sleep. I don't feel fear. I'm perfect for this shift. He lunged for the knife. I dove. We hit the floor together, a tangle of limbs. He was strong, unnaturally so, his grip like a vice. He clawed at my face, his fingers cold and hard. Give up, he hissed. Let me take the shift. You can sleep forever in the dark. I kicked him in the stomach, scrambling for the knife. My fingers brushed the hilt. He stomped on my hand, shattering the bones in my fingers. I screamed, but adrenaline flooded my system, dulling the pain. I rolled, sweeping his legs. He fell heavy, like a sack of wet cement. I grabbed the knife with my good hand. The manager watched, checking his watch. Efficiency, Mr. Thorne. The other Elias snarled, his face shifting, revealing the monster underneath. Blank eyes, needle teeth. He lunged at my throat. I thrust the letter opener upward. It sank into his chest. There was no blood. Instead, he burst into a cloud of black dust, like a vacuum bag exploding. The dust swirled and was sucked into the ventilation vents with a high-pitched whine. I lay on the floor, panting, clutching the glowing silver blade. My hand throbbed. The manager stepped over me. He picked up his clipboard. Redundancy eliminated. Order restored. He looked down at me. Shift ends in 1 hour, Mr. Thorne. Do not disappoint me again. He turned and walked out the front door, fading into the pre-dawn mist before the door even swung shut. I was alone again. 4:30 a.m. I dragged myself up. My hand was purple and swollen. I needed ice. I wanted the ice machine. I didn't care if the ice was haunted. I scooped some into a towel and wrapped my hand. I was exhausted, broken, but I was alive. I sat on a stool, staring at the front door. I just had to make it a sunrise. But the coffee shop wasn't done with me. The binder lay on the counter. It was closed. Then it slowly opened. It flipped to the very last page. Past the rules. Past the warnings. Rule 0. Sunrise does not guarantee safety. The things that live here do not fear the light. They only fear being seen by the day's shift. You must ensure they are all back in their boxes before 6 a.m. If the day shift sees a monster, the paradox collapses, and you become part of the architecture. Back in their boxes, I whispered. I looked around. The shadows were still twitching. The acoustic tiles were bulging again. The red stain on the floor was starting to spread. I had to put the genie back in a bottle. I grabbed the silver letter opener. It was still glowing. Okay, I said, my voice shaking but resolute. Time to clean up. I started with the storage room. I marched back there, kicking the door open. The boxes I had labeled earlier were vibrating. Get back, I shouted, brandishing the silver blade. The light from it seemed to burn the shadows. The boxes stilled. I went to the basement door. I slammed it shut and locked it. Top, bottom, middle. Then I shoved a chair under the handle for good measure. I wanted the drive-through window. The glass was cracked where the woman had banged on it. I taped the out-of-order sign over the crack. I was running around, herding ghosts like cats. It was absurd. It was terrifying. 5:45 a.m. The sky outside was turning a bruised purple. Dawn was coming. I had one last thing to do. The radio. It was still unplugged. Rule 2. Do not plug it back in until sunrise. I waited. The silence in the shop was heavy, expectant. The entities were retreating, hiding in the cracks and crevices, waiting for the safety of the dark. 5:59 a.m. I stood by the radio, plug in hand. The sun crested the horizon. A beam of golden light hit the dusty window of the shop. 6 a.m. I plugged the radio in. Static. Then, abruptly, cheerful pop music filled the room. Good morning, Lubbock. It's a beautiful Tuesday. The DJ chirped. The heavy atmosphere vanished instantly. The shadows became just shadows. The smell of rot was replaced by the smell of stale coffee. I slumped against the counter, sliding down to the floor. I laughed. A dry, broken sound. The front door chimed. A young woman walked in, wearing a bright green apron. She looked fresh, rested, and painfully normal. Hey, she said, smiling. You must be the new night guy. Elias, right? I looked up at her from the floor, clutching my broken hand, covered in sweat and grime. Yeah, I croaked. That's me. How was your first shift? She asked, tying her hair back. Mr. Abernathy said it can get a little spooky at night. I looked at the basement door. I looked at the letter opener in my pocket. I looked at the freshly mopped floor that had been covered in blood an hour ago. I started. Then I saw it. On the counter, where the binder had been. The binder was gone. In its place was a single sticky note. See you tonight. I looked at the girl. It was dead, I said. Totally dead. She laughed. Well, go get some sleep. You look like hell. I stood up, my legs trembling. I walked out into the parking lot. The sun was blinding. The air was hot and dry. Real. I got in my car. My hand was shaking so bad I could barely get the key in the ignition. I drove away, watching the coffee shop shrink in my rearview mirror. It looked so normal. A quaint little Victorian house on the prairie. But I knew. I looked at my hand. The swelling was going down, but the bruising was dark. And on my palm, traced in the purple bruise, was a shape. A key. I wasn't just an employee anymore. I was a key holder. I had survived the night, but the shift wasn't over. It was just paused. And tonight, I had to go back. Because Rule 51, which I saw burned into my mind as I closed my eyes, was the worst one of all. Rule 51, you cannot quit. You can only be replaced. The drive home was a blur of overexposed white light and heat. The West Texas sun beat down on my windshield with a ferocity that felt personal, bleaching the color of the world. I gripped the steering wheel with my good hand, the other throbbing in a rhythmic, dull cadence that matched the pounding in my skull. Every time I blinked, I saw the afterimage of the manager's hollow eyes. Every time I inhaled, I smelled the phantom scent of sulfur and burnt coffee beans. Normalcy was offensive. I passed a gas station where a man was casually pumping fuel into a pickup truck. I saw a woman walking a golden retriever. They looked like paper cutouts, two-dimensional props on a stage that I knew was rotting from the underside. How could they just exist? How could they walk around in the sunlight, oblivious to the fact that just a few miles down the highway, there was a building where the laws of physics were treated as suggestions and shadows had teeth? I reached my apartment complex, a drab collection of brick buildings that usually felt suffocating. Now, it felt like a fortress. I stumbled up the stairs, fumbling with my keys. My hand was shaking so violently it took me 3 tries to unlock the door. I practically fell inside, slamming the door behind me and throwing the deadbolt. Then the chain. Then I dragged my heavy oak bookshelf across the entryway. It was irrational. If the manager could walk through shadows, a bookshelf wouldn't stop him. But my lizard brain demanded a barricade. I collapsed onto my couch, staring at the ceiling. Silence. Blessed, sterile silence. No clicking in the vents. No whispering from the basement. Just the hum of the air conditioner and the distant traffic. I looked at my hand. The makeshift ice pack had melted, soaking the towel. I unwrapped it. The swelling had gone down, but the bruise remained. It was a deep, violently purple mark in the center of my palm, shaped unmistakably like an old-fashioned skeleton key. It wasn't just a surface contusion. It looked like the ink had been injected deep into the muscle. I traced the shape with my thumb. It felt warm. It's over, I whispered, trying to convince myself. I did the shift. I survived. But as I closed my eyes, drifting into a jagged, uneasy sleep, the words from the binder floated behind my eyelids. You cannot quit. You can only be replaced. I dreamed of the red door. In the dream, I was back in the basement, but the flashlight was dead. I was navigating by the red glow of the door. I could hear the hungry things in the dark, their dry, scuttling movements encircling me. I reached for the door handle, but it wasn't brass anymore. It was made of bone, and when I turned it, the door didn't open to a room. It opened into my apartment. I saw myself sleeping on the couch, vulnerable and exposed, and standing over me, blocking the light, was the other Elias. He smiled, his teeth too many and too sharp, and raised the silver letter opener. I woke up with a scream caught in my throat, thrashing against the cushions. The room was dark. I had slept through the day. The digital clock on the microwave read 8:45 p.m. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. I had to be at work by 10 p.m. No, I said aloud, sitting up. No way. I'm not going back. I'll ghost them. Let them fire me. I stood up to go to the kitchen for water. My throat felt like I had swallowed a handful of sand. I reached for a glass, but my hand froze. Sitting on my kitchen counter, right next to the sink, was a white ceramic mug. It wasn't mine. My mugs were all chipped IKEA blue. This one was heavy, cream-colored, with a logo stamped on the side, the rusty mug, and it was steaming. I backed away, my heart hammering against my ribs. I hadn't brought that home. I hadn't even been to the kitchen since I got back. I approached it slowly, like it was a bomb. I looked inside. Black coffee. The surface of the liquid was perfectly still, yet it was rippling with heat. Reflecting in the black liquid wasn't my face. It was the ceiling of the coffee shop, with the acoustic tiles bulging downward. A piece of paper was tucked under the mug. A yellow sticky note. Attendance is mandatory. The key must be turned. I looked at my palm. The key-shaped bruise pulsed with a sharp, stinging pain, syncing with the throbbing of the mug's heat. I wasn't just an employee. I had been marked. The shop wasn't a location I went to. It was a condition I had contracted. If I didn't go back, the shop would come here. The hungry things wouldn't stay in the basement hallway. They would come out of my closet. The manager wouldn't inspect the lobby. He would inspect my living room. I realized then the true, insidious nature of the trap. The rules weren't there to keep me safe from the monsters. The rules were a ritual, a containment protocol. The night shift wasn't a job. It was a wardenship. And by surviving the first night, by killing the doppelganger and restoring order, I had proven myself a capable vessel. I wasn't hired. I was drafted. I grabbed the mug and poured the contents down the sink. The liquid screamed as it hit the drain, a high, thin shriek of steam. I didn't care. I needed to get ready. I went to my bedroom and changed. I put on the black slacks, the black shirt. I found the silver letter opener in my pocket. It had lost its glow, looking like a dull piece of junk metal now, but I kept it. I grabbed a flashlight, my own, a heavy tactical one. I grabbed a pocket knife. I drove back to the coffee shop in silence. The highway was empty, the darkness of the plains swallowing the headlights. As the Victorian structure came into view, silhouetted against the moon, I didn't feel the same dread I had felt the night before. I felt a grim, cold acceptance, the kind a soldier feels returning to the trench. The parking lot was empty save for a single beat-up sedan. The day shift. I walked to the door. The bell chimed. The girl from the morning, the one with the green apron, was wiping down the counter. She looked up and smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes were tired, rimmed with red. "You came back," she said. It wasn't a question. Didn't have much choice. I replied, leaning against the counter. She stopped wiping. She looked at my hand, at the bruise on my palm. She nodded, a subtle, almost imperceptible movement. "Elias, right?" "Yeah." "I'm Sarah," she said. She untied her apron. "Listen, Elias, the day shift, it has rules too. Not like yours. But we have to keep things prepped. We have to make sure the customers don't see the cracks." She leaned in close. "I found a tooth in the grinder this morning. A human molar. I ground up. I served it. Because if I acknowledged it, the grinder would have jammed, and the line would have stopped, and you would have noticed." She shuddered. "We're all trapped here, Elias. Just keep the lid on tight tonight." "Okay." The foundation is settling. I can hear it groaning all day. She grabbed her bag and hurried toward the door, pausing only to look back at me with a mixture of pity and relief. "Don't let the fire go out," she said. And then she was gone. I was alone again. 10 p.m. I locked the front door. I flipped the sign to drive-through only. I walked to the counter and opened the binder. There was a new page. It wasn't typed. It wasn't handwritten by Abernathy. It was written in my handwriting, though I didn't remember writing it. Rule 52. The warden is now active. You have a silver blade. You have the key. Do not rely on the phone anymore. The phone is for novices. You are the authority now. If the shadows act up, you do not hide. You reprimand them. I stare the words. Reprimand them. The lights dimmed to 50%. The radio switched itself off, then clicked back on, playing the static-filled classical music. Thump. The sound came from the basement. I didn't flinch. I walked to the kitchen. I made myself a double shot of espresso, drinking it black. The bitterness centered me. I walked to the basement door. It was rattling in its frame. Something down there was throwing itself against the wood, desperate to get out. Yesterday, I would have run. Yesterday, I would have prayed. Today, I took the silver letter opener out of my pocket. As my fingers closed around the hilt, the blade flared to life, glowing with a cold, blue luminescence. My bruise, the key, began to burn, sending a surge of adrenaline through my veins. I unlocked the door. Top, bottom, middle. I threw it open. The darkness of the basement swirled like a vortex. A face loomed in the shadows, pale, elongated, with eyes like rotting grapes. It hissed, recoiling from the light of the blade. Back, I commanded. My voice wasn't shaky. It was the voice of the manager. It was deep, resonant, and laced with power. The entity hissed again, swiping a claw at me. I stepped forward, slashing the air with the silver blade. A line of blue fire trailed in the air. The entity shrieked and retreated down the stairs. I said, "Get back," I growled. "Inventory is not until midnight. You stay in your boxes." I slammed the door shut and locked it. I turned back to the shop. The chairs were starting to vibrate. The napkin dispenser was oozing. "Enough," I shouted, slamming my hand, the one with the key, onto the counter. A shockwave of blue energy rippled out from my palm. The chairs froze. The ooze sucked back into the dispenser. The flickering lights stabilized. Silence returned to the shop. I took a deep breath. I walked to the drive-through window and put on the headset. "BZRT, help me." A voice whimpered. "Welcome to the Rusty Mug," I said, my voice flat and authoritative. "We are out of the red-eye special. Order something else or leave." There was a pause. Then a fearful, submissive whimper. "Latte. Skim milk." "Drive forward," I said. I started the grinder. The machine roared to life. I looked at the reflection in the window. My eyes, they looked darker. The pupils were expanding, swallowing the iris. I was changing. The shop was metabolizing me, turning me into a component of its immune system. I wasn't sure if I was human anymore, but I knew one thing. I was in charge. I survived the night shift because I became the thing the night shift fears. So here I am. It's 4 a.m. now, the lull before the pre-dawn chaos. I'm writing this down on the back of the inventory sheets because I need you to know. I need someone to know. If you're ever driving through West Texas on that long, lonely stretch of highway outside Lubbock, and you see a Victorian coffee shop that looks a little too dark, a little too out of place, keep driving. Don't stop for coffee. Don't look in the windows. And whatever you do not apply for the job. The benefits are terrible. The hours will kill you. And the retirement plan is non-existent. But if you do stop, if you hear the static on the radio and see the lights flicker, don't panic. Just follow the rules. And if you see a guy behind the counter with a silver knife and a bruise on his palm, don't make eye contact. Just take your coffee and leave. Because I have a lot of work to do, and the manager is due for his inspection in 30 minutes. And trust me, you do not want to be here when you find a rule broken. I have to go. The basement door is knocking again. And this time, I think it's something big. Wish me luck. Or better yet, wish me order. The end.